Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads. Lee here, and welcome to my weekend books. Now, if you follow along on my channel, you know that I recently started graduate school, and within the last 2 weeks, and I knew going in that my reading, my leisure reading would change. In fact, it's almost non-existent, but I will talk a little bit more about that later on in this program. So I did not read anything for leisure this week, just like last week. All of my reading has been concentrated on my schoolwork. But I think that may change a little bit. I think I may have found some room to read for leisure again. And that is, usually when I come home from work, I spend from about 5:36 to 8 o'clock doing my studies, my schoolwork. And then after that, I still have an hour and a half where I need to wind down. And I've tried reading some schoolwork books, but that's still working my brain. I've tried watching TV, but I just can't get into it. I don't enjoy TV like I used to. I enjoy certain programs like The Great British Bake Off and Top Chef, but usually I watch those on Saturday and Sunday mornings because I record them and I don't think they're on right now. But that's not the point. So I may, the last hour of the day, pick up a book and use it to wind down. Won't be the volume that I read last year or the years prior. Anyway, we'll see. And on that note, when it comes to book reviews, yesterday I scheduled a meeting with our instructor to get some face-to-face advice on how to write a strong thesis statement, because that's where I'm struggling right now. It's been 20 years since it's been 26 years since I was in school and last had to write a paper. So I know what it is in theory, but in practicality, on paper, I'm having trouble with it. So I met with her just to get some ideas. She gave me some great ideas. I got some good feedback. I really have a better idea of what it is now, but she couldn't have known this. One of the examples she used about what is not a thesis statement is a book review or a book report. And she talked about how people who do book reviews mostly just summarize it and then sometimes tell you how they feel, but never really why the book is important, why that individual thinks that book is important or not. And I just lost my thought. However, it was like a light bulb went on in my head when she used that as an example. And I think I'm going to use her feedback to make my book reviews stronger when I go back to doing them regularly. It got me thinking over the evening, and I realized I'm the same. I do a little summary or I read a blurb and then I tell you how I feel about it. When I have been at my best, in my opinion, is when a book makes me angry, particularly one I'm thinking about. I don't have it here. I still have it. It still makes me angry. It's the book by Murder Road by Simone St. James. And I was incensed when I read this because if you may have seen my video on it, you may not have, but the author conflated the Gulf War with the Iraq War, which was started in 2003. And the book was set in 1995. So I was furious because of that, because it was insulting to me as a veteran and a reader. And in my review, I went point by point, everything she got wrong and why it was not factual. So that gave me some inspiration on how to do a thesis statement, not necessarily on something that makes me angry, but what I did there was kind of the essence of a thesis statement, and now real light bulb moment. So again, it's going to inform how I do reviews when I start doing them again, which will not be this month most likely. I've got to get through my first capstone essay and midterm exam, and then if I feel comfortable, I'll start seeing how things go for reviews and reading. Now, one of the things when I first got the bill, it's for two quarters. Yes. And it was expensive. So I spent the last probably 6 paychecks paying for this first semester of school. Then summer's going to be right behind it. And I thought, you know, if I stop spending so much on books, I'll be able to afford that. And I have sort of cut down my books, the fiction book buying, sort of. But I realized you still have to buy books for grad school. No problem. I looked at all the syllabi. I could pay for the whole 2-year program and spend less than I normally would on a year in books. But then I get into this first class, and on the Canvas website, they have your required reading for that period, usually a book I've already bought, and then they have, oh yeah, here's some suggested readings if you want to. You don't have to. I had to stop myself from buying everything suggested, mostly. I did pick up several. Not all of them are included here. Some of them I think I posted about last week. But I've got 3 here. One was not suggested, but I'll get to that at the end because I'm very excited about that book. The first one, I'm going to have to read you a blurb from Goodreads because the book itself does not have a blurb. It's got some I don't know what they're called, where other people tell you how great the book is. Anyway, this is the Wehrmacht Retreats, Fighting a Lost War, 1943, by Dr. Robert M. Citino. Now, Dr. Citino is a lecturer in the course that I'm taking now and is the professor for the course that I'm going to take next quarter. So in this school, online school, there are recorded videos that you have to watch every week. So it's not like I get live with Dr. Citino, but I found his lecturing style so engaging. I absolutely love him. He's vivid and, I don't know the right words, but this book I bought because, I buy books. Throughout 1943, the German army heirs to a military tradition that demanded and perfected relentless offensive operations, succumbed to the realities of its own overreach and the demands of 20th century industrialized warfare. In his new study, prize-winning author Robert Citino chronicles this weakening Wehrmacht, now fighting desperately on the defensive, but still remarkably dangerous and lethal. Drawing on his impeccable command of German-language sources, Citino offers fresh, vivid, and detailed treatments of key campaigns during this fateful year. The Allied landings in North Africa, General von Manstein's great counterstroke in front of Kharkov, the German attack at Kasserine Pass, the titanic engagement of tanks and men at Kursk, the Soviet counteroffensives at Orel and Belgorod, and the Allied landings in Sicily and Italy. Through these events, he reveals how a military establishment historically configured for violent aggression reacted when the tables were turned, how German commanders viewed their newest enemy, the U.S. Army, after brutal fighting against the British and the Soviets, and why, despite their superiority in material and manpower, the Allies were unable to turn 1943 into a much more decisive year. It goes on and on and on. However, I'm excited to read this, or at least use it as a reference at some point in the near future. Because I'm going to be doing a lot of referencing as opposed to reading, just because of the nature of the school and how much you have to write and how little time I have left for reading. Next book is another one that they recommended, also about Germany, and that is Felix Romer's Comrades, The Wehrmacht from Within, translated by Alex J. Kay. I actually have another book that's, I think, similar to this. It's called Tapping Hitler's Generals. I bought that off a recommendation from someone on Twitter. In Comrades, it's a new history of the mentalities of ordinary Wehrmacht soldiers. So Tapping Hitler's Generals is about the generals. This is ordinary soldiers. based on recently discovered intelligence records from the American interrogation camp Fort Hunt near Washington, where German POWs were interned and secretly listened in on during the Second World War. U.S. military intelligence recorded tens of thousands of open conversations between Wehrmacht soldiers and captured them in verbatim transcripts. And these are verbatim transcripts. Love it. The resulting collection offers new insights into the thinking and worldviews of ordinary members of Hitler's armed forces, their attitudes towards National Socialism and the Führer, their views of war and their experiences during the fighting, and their knowledge of and participation in war crimes and the Holocaust. The accompanying biographical information reveals how their mindsets were connected to their individual past through the Third Reich, the Wehrmacht, and the war. Comrades offers a nuanced and realistic account of life in the Wehrmacht based on unique source material which allows us to see the Second World War through the eyes of the protagonists. So again, there are so many books and so little time. But I'm going to be flipping through that in the near future. Now, finally, this last book wasn't one of the suggested readings. This was actually required reading, and they had PDFs available in Canvas to read sections of it. And I was so excited about what I read, and I learned so much that really proves how little I know about Japan and the Pearl Harbor and what happened before Pearl Harbor. And so I liked these excerpts so much that I ordered the book. I spent a lot of money on it. And that is Pearl Harbor and the Coming of the Pacific War, A Brief History with Documents and Essays. Primary sources here, folks, by Akira Iraye. I probably mispronounced that, and I apologize. In my discussion post this week, I wrote about whether or not war was imminent in 1941 prior to Pearl Harbor. And I think that really it was not imminent, unavoidable. And I think it really, by this point, by 1941, particularly after Roosevelt froze assets, Japanese assets, I think it was unavoidable. I think it was unavoidable because of Japan's actions. They were always moving toward war, even while negotiations were going on. And then when the Americans realized that the Japanese weren't being completely transparent, they issued the Hull Note, which Japan took as an insult, etc., etc. That's what I learned about. And this assembles more than 30 primary documents, including proposals, memoranda, decrypted messages, and imperial conference reports. Iraye presents diplomatic exchanges from both American and Japanese perspectives to determine how and why the U.S. and Japan went to war in 1941. A detailed introduction provides background on Japanese aggression in China and Southeast Asia during the 1930s and economic unrest and isolationism in the United States. Readings add an interpretive dimension, placing Pearl Harbor in the global context with essays from Americans, Japanese, Chinese, Soviet, German, British, and Indonesian perspectives that explain how various countries applied pressure, offered assistance, exacerbated rifts, and significantly affected negotiations in Japan's ultimate decision for war. Now, this next part that I'm going to tell you about, I don't 100% have every detail of it down pat. So if I misunderstand or misinterpret something, please forgive me and tell me nicely in the comments. So the Hull Note came in late November 1941. Japan has already made a plan to attack Pearl Harbor. Either the 26th or 27th of November, the aircraft carriers took off, headed that way, and then, the attack happened. And Japan had sent a memorandum, but it was in many parts, and it took a while to get to their ambassadors, their negotiators, and as a result, it was supposed to be delivered to Cordell Hull before, 25 minutes before the attack on Pearl Harbor. That didn't happen. The attack happened. The negotiators came, this was much later in the day, to Hull, gave him the memorandum. He's reading it, and one of the things that I read in here was his hands were shaking. He was so angry, and he turned around and like castigated the negotiators. And I would have loved to be a fly on the wall, because my understanding was the negotiators, when they delivered that message, didn't realize the attack had happened. And that's hard for me to kind of believe, because of when we live now and the way that news travels like at lightning speed. And I know Hull was already aware of it. I'm not sure if the American people were already aware of it, or that's one of the reasons I ordered this book, is so I could dig a little bit deeper into that moment in history and how it was just amazing it must have been. In, horrible what happened at Pearl Harbor, but these negotiators coming into, to deliver a message, hey, negotiations are over. Well, no shit. You just attacked our Pearl Harbor. So, anywho, that's the kind of stuff that really gets me excited, and I'm glad that I've started this class. Look forward to reading this. This is going to go into a special place on my bookshelf. I just have to find it so it doesn't get messed up, because it was expensive. Anywho, I have rambled on long enough about my school and myself. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments if you've read anything good. Look, I can't buy another nonfiction or another fiction book. I can buy nonfiction if it supports my school, but I can't. I've got so many fiction books that I haven't read. But if you have a suggestion of something that's light, relatively short, and a good read that will kind of help cleanse my palate after schoolwork, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. Chances are I might have that book. Anywho, as always, if you stuck with me this long, thank you for sticking with me on my journey, and happy reading.